Hello, everyone. This is Jay Alders. Welcome to another episode of Shifting Perceptions podcast. Doing something fun and a little different today. I'm going to be sharing with you a conversation that I had with Meredith Hackwith Edwards, who runs the Meredith For Real podcast. This conversation first aired on her podcast, Meredith For Real podcast, and it was one of those conversations that I felt, both of us felt actually, that will be worth sharing on here as well. The conversation focuses on making time for yourself, especially making time for your creativity, and why a lot of us don't do it enough. How to make time for the things we love. I bring you the conversation I had with Meredith Hackwith Edwards. I hope you love it.
Jay, it's so great to have you again. Last time we talked, it was 2020. And it's been a wild 3 years, but we made it.
Yeah, I'm excited, Meredith. I always love our chats, and even though we haven't talked in a while, we always kind of keep loosely in touch on social media, and I always see all your cool posts and videos, so I feel like I've talked to you, since our last chat. Let's do this.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about the internet is you keep these. Some people have, these parasocial relationships, but then you have these like hybrid real relationships that are lightly nurtured along the way with just simple comments and likes. So we do have the internet to think about. As much as I bitch about the ails of society that the internet has brought us, I do appreciate that. So, and I was thinking about the last time we talked in 2020, and it feels like a lifetime ago, and how during quarantine, everyone seemed to be picking up hobbies, They're in between baking cookies, drinking, and getting a divorce. People were like, I should take up the guitar. And all those hobbies that people took up, I think now that life's getting back to normal and people are even going back to offices, which is wild to me.
Icky.
I know. That's not the life for me. Especially as a fellow introvert, you understand that because it's death by a thousand cuts via small talk in an office. And you're like, just let me do my job. But I feel like a lot of people have put those hobbies to the side now, and they're not making time for the things that they love. They recalibrated for a minute, and now they've kind of reverted back to not making time for things that brought them pleasure.
Yeah, that's really sad. I've noticed that too. I think I've done the exact opposite. Like I didn't drink at all during COVID. I worked out like a monster. I did all my usual hobbies and then some, and I have kept those hobbies and probably added more since COVID. So it's sad. I see a lot of my friends that became extra cool during COVID. Like they were having fun again and doing cool things. And then all of a sudden they're back to work. And I'm like, I thought you'd like to do all these things that we were just doing. What just happened? And it's like no fault of their own. It's really sad. It's a shame, and it's sad what reality is for a lot of people. And at times, if we're being honest, probably for us too. It's sad that so much of our lives are kind of not in control the way we would like them to be. The currency of life we spend in strange ways, and it's not really our fault. It's just sort of how society is set up. But I think that COVID was a good reset to be like, oh yeah, I actually forgot I like to do such and such, or I forgot I like to have time to think and all those sorts of things. So yeah, I'm with you on that one.
The currency of life, that is really profound. That was something that changed for me during quarantine. Was I thought about death a lot more, and thankfully not in a way that required mental health intervention. That's an important distinction, but in a way that helped me understand the currency of life a little bit more. And how do I spend my time? And do you ever do this after you do something that was fun? I'm using air quotes. You look back and go, was that fun? Did I enjoy that? And I think that's the sifting and the discernment of making time for things that you do love is assessing if what you're doing is something that you even love or have to do.
I think about that stuff all the time, and I think I would say it's a part of getting older, but I don't think it is for everyone. I think that for me, it's become a part of getting older is acknowledging what you actually like to do, what you don't like to do, being able to say no to things, setting boundaries with friends and yourself as well. I know for me, I used to party like crazy, and I gave up I'll have half a glass of wine once in a while, but I pretty much don't drink anymore. And it's funny, when you take away the social and chemical crutches, what you're left with is sort of a more true, in my case, a more true version of who you are. And I realized that a lot of the things that I loved doing, some of them were things that I like to say that I like to do that I did. It was things that I thought were really fun to do, but without the chemical lubricants, it was like, was I really having fun, or was I really covering up something else? I don't actually remember the question you asked to maybe say all that, but that's what came to mind.
Well, I don't think I asked a question. Well, this is a question.
Hey.
What was the Zinga? What was the thing that you decided that you didn't actually enjoy, that it was more of the chemical lubricants that made it, air quotes, fun, not real life fun?
I feel like we talked about in a more casual conversation before this how we're both sort of introverted, but I think we also have that really strong extroverted side. Like right now we're communicating, we're not like hiding in a corner withering away. So we like to,
Yeah.
I think we're like kind of a combo platter of personalities. But I feel like at a large point in my life, I had to be sort of the center of attention at every party, at every gathering. And I think that throwing back some booze or like smoking on a big giant bong or certain things really helped with pushing that side of me forward. And those were true sides. Like I love being interactive and social, but it pushed me in an artificial way where it really kind of made me flock to the clubs or the bars or the social settings. And I had to become a different version of myself in order to really thoroughly enjoy that. And then after a while, as you get older, as your friends start having kids, as people start getting married and all these different things change, I sort of realized how small my circle of friends has gotten, because the people that I choose to spend time with, I become very selective over. Because if it's not people like yourself or other people that I enjoy communicating with, I'd rather be by myself. I'd rather be with my kids. I'd rather be playing my guitar or painting. And so I feel like a lot of those social things were sort of forced. When becoming sober kind of set in, or mostly sober most of the time, you sort of like, oh, that wasn't actually that fun. You know, the next day you realize I don't feel good, or just kind of like you get a social hangover, or those people don't actually give a shit about me. We were just hanging out back in the day trying to pick up chicks or trying to look cool or trying to have a great story for the next time we went out. So I feel like stuff like that, I guess. How about you?
Yes. Well, my process of, discerning, okay, do I enjoy this? Don't I enjoy this? Is definitely in my body. Like it's kind of a intuitive thing. And it used to be mixed with a lot of guilt. I used to have, I like to joke that I would should all over myself, SHOULD.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I used to enjoy this activity, or I used to enjoy hanging out in this way or with these people, and now I don't, but I should.
Right.
And that discernment process becomes, it's really like personal work. It has nothing to do with the people around me or what they're doing right or wrong. It's all about just my own progression as a human. I remember like back in 2020, I think we were, either it was on mic or off mic, I don't remember, but we were talking about what my midlife crisis was when I was like changing careers and stuff. And I was describing the process as hot, cold. And that I don't know where I'm going with this podcast thing or with my life in general, but I go in the direction of people, places, and experiences that at least feel warm, and I will explore them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's very similar process of figuring out, does this bring me joy? Or does it matter that it's, an old lady activity? Like seriously, the whole middle-aged woman and her poisonous houseplants stereotype. I'm like, well, you know what? Here we are, folks. I'm embodying it.
Yeah.
And I'm not ashamed, because it feels like a warm direction to go. And I think that's probably my process and even looking back, like you said, the next morning you go, okay, how did I feel about that? I think I do that too. I try to do it a little bit sooner than the next morning. And I check in with my body and I go, okay, do I feel like a lot of energy went out, or do I have energy in? Am I charged or drained? And I use that as data points to figure out, did I enjoy that? And then always trying something new, because I think humans are so adaptive that if we if we immerse ourselves in misery, we're so adaptive that we'll decide within ourselves that, you know what, this misery is great and I love it and it's mine and I am happy. I'm totally fulfilled and I do enjoy this. When in fact you've recalibrated your brain and your body to survive. And so I think that's, for me, that's why it's important to always try new things, despite the dopamine levels that you get from trying novel experiences. But that way you always have a new gauge by which to measure your old experiences.
Yeah, that it completely makes sense. I think the dangerous part for people like us that are sort of, or at least this is how I interpret you also, but I'm speaking upon myself now. We sort of are obsessed with like self-work and self-care and blah, 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 and learning this and getting it better at that. It was interesting something you said. You said, I often don't wait till the next morning. You think in the moment. And I do too, but I think that can become dangerous because there's certain sides of ourselves that need different things. And sometimes for me, the side of me that's always like, am I using my time the best way possible? Am I learning something? Am I adapting? Am I growing right now? That side of me can be really an asset. He could also be a dick. That side of me can also be like the total bummer, and telling my fun self that just wants to like surf or just wants to paint or play guitar, you really shouldn't be doing this. You should actually be reading that book while you're also organizing your folders, while you're also thinking about this, while you're also listening to an audiobook on whatever. And I feel like so it's important to be tapped into the energy, but it's also important to be aware of which Meredith is speaking to you at that moment. And I'm like hyper aware of this when I'm painting, because when I'm painting, it's just me and a paintbrush, and there's generally no distraction. And I've been, over the past 10 years especially, I've been very tuned into like which thoughts I'm having during that. And it's fascinating. And it's one of those things where I want to step away and start writing it, but I know that would ruin the moment. So I try to just use that as a meditative experience of watching. Like I was painting the other day and I was watching the thoughts in my head going all these crazy directions. Like one of the voices was like, oh my God, this is amazing. You are so good. This is going to be the painting that like makes Picasso look like he sucks. And then all of a sudden it went from that to being like, oh my God, I can't believe you just did that. Are you really paying attention to what you're like? And it was like all these different voices and all these different personalities, and I sort of personify those personalities in my head. Oh, that's the me that does this, and that's the Jay that does that. Oh, that's interesting. And it's important to be aware of your different sides, I think, as opposed to just being binary. This is bad. This is good. How am I feeling at this moment? So I think it's nuanced for me.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Yes, we are definitely alike in that. And yes, I do have to be careful of that. In fact, that has been, heavy sigh, something that I've been trying to reconcile within myself is the polarity of selves.
Yes.
And yeah, that sounds real hippie, and that's because it is.
Yeah.
It was something I had my first shroom trip, and that was my intention going in, is I don't know what to do with these parts of myself, and they seem to really create inaction within me. And it's like the fight, flight, or freeze. It becomes mostly the freeze. And it becomes the freeze in things that I enjoy you described it perfectly. That's interesting that your sides of yourself, they are just like the audience to what you're doing. Is that how you reconcile your polarity within? Or do you have some other brilliant tip you want to share with the class?
I'm not going to say brilliant, but I think it goes back and forth between being like an audience member watching in, and then when I become aware of being an audience member looking in, I try when I become aware of it, which is rare, but when I do, I try to take a step back and be like, okay, who's watching the audience member right now? And what I try to do is keep peeling that back, and I'm like, okay, now I'm tapped into the guy in me, the person in me that's watching the audience member who's watching that crazy voice, and I try to go back layers and layers and layers until it kind of just fades away into like nonsense. And then sometimes I think about it in a paradigm of like, okay, this is who's steering me right now. And sometimes I use it to my benefit. When I'm painting, for instance, I notice that certain personalities in me, like there's a side of me that paints that loves listening to really inappropriate gangster rap. And that's just, I don't know. that guy loves to do that. So I feel like when there's a side of me that wants to paint more loose, like when I feel myself being too like anal retentive and I'm like yeah, I'm trying to be all crazy with details and get crazy and trying to take myself too serious, I'm like, it feels a certain way, and I correlate that feeling to this side of me. And that side of me is very helpful because sometimes you need to be very detail oriented and you need to be very big picture focused. But sometimes you get lost in that, and it becomes, it's like you said with the feeling, when it becomes not fun anymore, when it feels strained, or I'll notice signs around me, like when I start to drop things or when I hit something and I'm not paying attention, like I paint with what's called a maul stick, which keeps my hand balanced. It's one hand holds the stick, one hand rests on the stick, and then I try to keep my hand steady. And this is a tangent, but here we go. So sometimes I'll notice that I'm very aware of my surroundings and everything going on. Sometimes that stick hits my light behind me and it makes like a gong sound. And I think when it goes like gong, I'm like, okay, I'm not paying attention at all. Like maybe it's time to switch personalities to drive the ship of me. And then sometimes I'll throw on like Jay-Z or I'll throw on like Led Zeppelin or Metallica. It just depends on what the mood I'm in. And sometimes I have to tone it back and be like, okay, it's time to listen to classical music right now. And then let the different sides of me each have a turn. And when they each have a turn, then I feel like it's more balanced. Which sounds crazy, but that's kind of how I do it.
No, it doesn't sound crazy at all. And you know what is crazy to me, like crazy good, is that you have the same outward body indicator of lack of mindfulness that I do, which makes me wonder if other people have that too. I drop stuff. I run into stuff. I knock stuff over. And then I'm like, okay, that means my mind and my body are in two different locales. Let's see if we can bring them back together. I love the idea of disrupting the pattern of thought that you're in to like downshift or upshift into different gears with music. That's brilliant. That is brilliant. Someone asks you in the future, do you have anything brilliant? You just be like, yes, you know what? Meredith said that this is brilliant. Are you ready?
Cue minute 14.2, whatever, of Meredith's podcast. And there you go. Yeah. Boom. Sometimes it's like with brilliant. Sometimes it's with movement. I'll just jump around, or I'll do yoga, and sometimes I just have to get out of the space and go for a walk. But I feel like it's very important to feel that. And sometimes it's like you spill stuff, or I hit something, and I'm like, cool. Like it's also your reaction to the signs as well. Like sometimes for me, it's like I notice like my personality or my persona or the soul or whatever the hell hippy dippy word you want to use. There's a side of me that's doing this thing, and I notice it. And sometimes I'm like, it's a sign to switch something. Other times I'm like, cool, let's make a fucking mess, you know? And then you got to be cool with it. And other times you're like, it's not time to be a messy person anymore. Now it's time to be sophisticated. And so I think it's okay to honor your different sides. I feel like social media, one of the many, many negatives is that it forces us into a role. Like you become Meredith, the podcast lady that's known to say such and such things or whatever. And I'm known to be the art guy. I find it like amusing, but also confusing from a marketing standpoint when people peg me a certain way, and then I post something or say something or do something that doesn't align with their version of who I am. And then half of me is, from a marketing perspective, that's not good. I have to have a brand and I have to have a persona as an artist that people can relate to. And the other side of me is like, fuck that. I'm like, pardon, am I allowed to curse in your podcast, by the way?
100%.
Okay, cool.
Let your F word flag fly.
Awesome. Because I'm from Jersey, so it's like part of me, I have to honor like who I am. And there's sides of me that I'm like, I wish I was more sophisticated or more whatever, Picasso or Dali or whatever. I name these people in my head that I look up to or whatever. And like the other side of me is just be yourself, that. And it's hard to know who to be anymore because all of us have these many, 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 many sides. And if we're not careful, you get pegged to this one version of you, and then you start believing it. And then what you do as a creative person, and this is definitely not just me, I've talked to other musicians and artists about this, you become almost like an imitation of yourself. You become someone that is doing an impersonation of yourself, and that's dangerous.
Yes, I think, isn't that called memetics? Is that the right word?
Does it need a name? I don't know.
Well, there's some other episode that I'm researching right now, and this idea came up, and I'd never heard that word before. And again, I might not even be saying the word correctly.
Okay.
But it's like a phenomenon that happens in society, but social media amplifies it. And I think I had heard it in a couple different contexts, but one of them was in the aesthetic context, that women, with the popularity of fillers and Botox and all of the, just makeup and hairstyles, that everyone is basically trying to mimic one another. And so that they all become a watered down version of each other.
Yeah.
So the uniqueness among the ranks is diluted to the point where nobody is interesting. Everybody is kind of this copycat of each other. And I could definitely see in the creative world how this would be a potential to be a problem. But I could also see it in someone who doesn't consider themselves a creative, that would play out. If you think about the average middle-aged lady on Facebook, let's say, and she sees, oh my gosh, it's crazy hair day and Susie did her daughter's hair like really cool. And oh my gosh, that was next level. And look, there's a bounce house party and they did a balloon arch for this gender reveal. And so everyone's...
Are you allowed to do that still?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, that is such a paradox, right? Yeah,
we'll go there later. Let's continue your story.
We'll go there later. Yeah, that's definitely a potential episode for another day. But it's like all these things that you see on social media. In this example, I'm using Facebook because they're more personal posts, right? You're not seeing like the highlight reel of, a world-renowned artist. You're seeing your next door neighbor and all the decorations she did for this, 5-year-old's birthday party. And so you go, okay, now I have to do that. But do you enjoy that?
Right.
And that's where the whole like making time for things you love and sifting out the things that you don't. Does that bring you joy? It might bring Susie joy, but because of the way our ancient minds are wired and the way that our modern tools work, right? Mm-hmm. It's like a real big conflict within us. And we create for ourselves these little prisons of repeating things that we don't even like doing.
Yeah, there's a lot in what you said there that I could unpack and comment on, because I definitely relate to it. I think I'll start here, since we're talking about gender. I feel like we're seeing it more nowadays, which is good, but I feel like the social myth that women have more of the aesthetic pressures or more of the social pressures than men do, I think that's a total myth. And
oh, really?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, take it from any angle. Let's start from the aesthetic part. I think that women definitely have a pressure to make sure that you're made up and your hair and blah, blah, blah. But as a guy, I 100,000,000% felt the same pressure. Unfortunately, I'm not a guy who's like 6'3" with a giant chiseled jaw and giant shoulders. Do I wish I was, if I'm being honest? Yeah, I really do. I never have been, so I've had to accept the form that I was born in, as we all do. Now, when I was growing up, like my heroes were like, superheroes and Bruce Lee and like G.I. Joe toys and Batman and all these different guys that I could never be. And so I think that guys do a really good job of kind of hiding it and kind of keeping it, bottled up. But there's like a reason that guys are in the gym or some guys are in the gym a lot. We do things to make our stock grow. I think that it's obviously nuanced for men versus women. There's different versions of it, but I don't think it's any less significant for men than it is for women as far as the aesthetic thing goes. And as far as the other stuff goes, what I was thinking of is like being a parent. I think that also is a myth with parents, that moms are the ones that spend all their time on Etsy and all these different Pinterest sites and all these different things comparing, what can I do, and blah, blah, blah. I don't know about most guys, but like for me and all my guy friends that I feel closest to, like we take our role as fathers extremely serious, and I put an enormous amount of pressure on myself. Like even to this day, I think, shit, I wish I had a more proper baby book for my kids, I wish I painted all these pictures of my kids and all these different things. But how I reconcile it myself, like, yeah, but I was busy being a good dad. And so I feel like you can be a great mom or a great dad and be there with your kids and be present and be empathetic and teach them lessons and do all those great things, or you can take time away from that to do all the Pinterest things and all the other aesthetic things and all those social media videos and stuff. And it kind of saddens me when I see parents like spend such a huge amount of effort to make their parenting experience look so magical and social media friendly, when I'm like, just be a parent, Like I think about a month ago, we had tons of rain where I live, and I took my dog for a walk with my kids. And it was pouring out, and I'm like, let's go for a walk. They're like, oh, it's raining. I'm like, cool, let's go. We just ran out. We got totally soaked. We were literally jumping into giant puddles, making huge splashes. And my kids were like, we're allowed to do this? I'm like, yeah, let's go, you know? And my one son, Grayson, was like, can I sit in the puddle? I'm like, hell yeah, you could sit in a puddle. So it was in all of his clothes. He just like sat in a puddle. I'm like, this is what it's about, not necessarily all the other stuff. That's, I guess, the first two things that popped in my head when you finished your awesome talk.
The others. Well, all the other stuff is, the gender role, I have 4 thoughts and they're all colliding at once, but the gender role thing, I think it is changing, and I suspect it's regional because you're in the Northeast and I'm in the South and I'm from the Midwest. And I'm not a parent. So there's so many variables to that. But I do see more involvement on both parents' sides. And so with more involvement comes more pressure regardless of, your gender. But what I hope that people will take away from our pontificating today is that it's okay to not participate in things that you don't love, because you have to make space. Because I think that's what happens when you're doing all the things the Joneses are doing, is you don't have space to have the creative thought, you know what, it's raining. Let's go outside and play in the rain. And that it could be, as it was for you, a special moment. But these special moments, whether they're with your children or your partner or by yourself or with your friends, they get missed because you're so exhausted doing the things that you actually don't care for, or that, you know what, the real danger zone is things that are neither good nor bad. Yeah. I think, isn't the word ambivalent? I'm struggling with words today, apparently, but we'll go with that. I think that's the word. I feel meh about that. And I think we have so much of that we're like, well, I'll just do it. But then at the end of the day, there's no emotional energy for these creative thoughts to come through. The kinds of energy that is required to assess your energy, the kinds of energy that's required to go, what would I enjoy? And we become disconnected from ourselves because we can't even answer the question, what is it that I want?
I think you're stumbling into territory that's making me think of the topic of delayed gratification. Because the reason I'm thinking about that is because so like for me, I'm known as an artist, but I also love to play guitar. I love to play bass. I love to noodle on the piano. I love to do all kinds of stuff. And all of those things that I literally love to do require doing a lot, not a little bit, but a lot of stuff that I feel meh about, right? So it's interesting because someone listening to this could choose to spend that meh energy on something that gives back to them. They can invest in themselves. And I'm not just talking about the self-empowerment, let's evolve kind of side of you, but the side of you that when I was a kid, I loved to draw, or when I always wish I could play piano, or whatever it might, something that has no purpose other than it's a goal that you have, right? And so I think that we all have some version of those things, and those things could be obviously further separated into the category of this is going to evolve me as a human, this is going to be really fun, this is going to advance my skills, whatever. You can break things down, forever. But when it comes down to it, I think a lot of people choose to spend the meh energy just plopping down on the couch and just watching shows they don't care about or scrolling through things. And it goes back to that life currency, right? So I feel like you could spend 10 minutes doing something that might be boring or not fulfilling or not giving back to your life on social media or Netflix or whatever, or you could spend that exact time, like when I'm cooking food for my kids, sometimes I'll work on learning my Spanish. I'm trying to get more fluent in Spanish, or if I'm organizing my closet, I might be listening to a podcast on guitar theory, or I might be working on social media stuff, which, to be quite honest, I really don't like doing, or I have to do admin stuff or office things or ship artwork. There's a lot of things we have to do that might fill the category of boring, and I think a lot of people put those things together because if you want to be good at painting, or even average at painting, or if you want to play guitar or whatever, it takes some boring time, but it's for a purpose. And I think that goes back to, are you willing to have delayed gratification? Are you willing to do stuff that's not fun or enjoyable for a purpose that's bigger than you?
That's so true. Yeah, because when I think about like the podcast, there's parts of it that I don't want to sit and watch a video tutorial on how to use the new software. Like
Yeah.
I'd rather have a pap smear. Like, it's not enjoyable at all. And I feel so antsy doing it, but it is the thing that like moves the needle forward.
Right.
And that kind of brings up the idea of utility versus pleasure, and also a little bit of like workaholicism, you know, because you were like, okay, I could be doing this and this would move this forward. And I didn't realize how similar we are. Just really interesting. I also do that. Like like at the end of the day, I'm like, oh, I'm done. Yay. What should I do now? And then I remember, oh, I have to cook dinner. But then I can listen to a podcast that is just for pleasure while I'm cooking dinner.
Yeah.
But there is that inner tug of war between trying to assign a metric to the things that we enjoy in order to move them up on the priority list, right?
Right.
And so I'd love to hear if you got anything for that, because it is a struggle to go, you know what, I'm going to make a seashell wreath this weekend. I did that a couple weekends ago and it felt so good.
Awesome.
And it was like for no other purpose than for pleasure. And I enjoyed it so much and I'm so proud of it. And every time I see it, it makes me happy. But there were definitely things I, air quotes, should have been doing in order to, you know, be, again, air quotes, responsible. But that just felt so good. And I'm not sure what it was that allowed me to do it, other than I purposefully did not schedule anything in my calendar for that weekend. So I had space for it, but I'm not sure what the mental shift was that made me go, this is both important and urgent, and I'm going to do it. And it's just because I like it, you know?
I don't know if there's a solid answer. If someone was coming to me with that, if a friend of me came to me and said that, I would ask them a million questions about them to drill in on them. So if you want to do that, I'm down. But I think that a lot of people let go of their creative side because of those reasons. They feel like, well, why am I going to paint a picture? Seriously? Or why am I going to do such and such? And I feel like when people ponder questions like the meaning of life, or you imagine yourself on your deathbed when you're 120, hopefully, or things like that, you think the meaning of life, I don't know what it is, but it must have something to do with enjoying it, I would think. Right? I think it has to do with a lot of things. You could probably throw in like legacy and family and all these different things, but ultimately it comes down to like living. Like, so what does that mean to truly live your life, not just go through the steps of living your life each day, and that turns into a month. We know how quickly years go. And so do you want a life that's full of experiences and full of fun and full of, I want to say bettering yourself, but not in a productive way. More like I want to learn. For me, I'm learning Spanish because it's like a goal, but I also would love to have conversations with people in different countries. And I'm trying to get better at guitar, not so I can be in a band, although that would be fucking awesome, but because I've always wanted to know what it feels like to speak music. Like the idea of being able to speak a language or speak in art or speak in music at a fluency level where we can talk right now as quickly as we want. And as long as we're speaking clearly enough, we could grasp it, process it, it goes in our head, and we can come up with an answer within a split second. The idea of being able to do that, to understand as many things as possible so I can enjoy them and so I can express myself through music and art and all these different things, I think that's like really important. And I think for people, they forget that. They go through the steps of I'm going to work and make all this money and spend all these things and buy all these blah, 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 blah. And what's the purpose? The purpose of having the money and having the job and having all these things is so that you what? So that you enjoy yourself more, so that you feel a certain way. So for me, I have chosen a certain path, which is definitely not the smartest financial path, I'll put on record, but I feel as though it gives me enough freedom to truly live in a way that I can express myself, I can have freedom, I can do things in a way that feels cohesive to who I am as a person, and sort of live in a way that gets me to the end result. Like I have friends that work like freaking crazy, make way more money than I do. And what's the purpose? I guess the purpose is so they have money, so they feel better, so they can do more things. I'd rather just do more things and be happy and just skip the middle part. You know what I mean? So it's they're such complex topics, but they're fun. They're fun to talk about.
Yeah, and they're fun to think about too, because when you were describing everything, the word that came to mind was just like the richness of life. There's no depth to life that is wash, rinse, repeat, and a copycat of your neighbor. Is that really rich? And I think creatives have a particular appetite to experience as much as they can. I hope that reincarnation is real, as long as I don't have to come back as like a stink bug or something. But it's not real. But there's so much. The reason that I hope that it's real is because there's so much in this world, in this life, that I want to also experience, that I feel like I would probably need another lifetime to do it in. And there's just not enough space for it. But there's also, right, so much of life is not this or that. It's this and that. There is also this part of me that has to win a debate in my head, that polarity, the part of me that is utilitarian, the part of me that is mechanical, list making, follows steps, thinks in linear ways.
Right.
She can be a real bitch, but she's very productive. And sometimes she drives the bus. And then there's this other part of me that's like the braless, barefoot hippie beach going, oh my God, it's raining. Like your example.
Sure.
Look at this seashell. It's so beautiful. And so I find that I do have to check the part of me that is utilitarian in order to let the part of me that is free-spirited kind of come into the picture. So here's a perfect example. I have struggled with consistent meditation ever since I started to meditate. And just sitting myself down and trying to make myself do it was really hard. I started going to a once a week meditation class where the teacher said, meditation is utility. And he expanded on that, talking about how it makes your brain better, et cetera, all these things, all these benefits. That cured me. I've been meditating almost daily since, like for 10 minutes, not even like a couple minutes, like for 10 minutes. And so I wonder, maybe there's room for justifying the things that you love to do by, painting it in a way that just gives your inner self permission. This is for my mental health. This is because I may stumble upon something brilliantly creative that I can make money off of in the case of, someone like you.
The first thing that popped in my head when you said that is a story that's going to make me sound stupid in my former self, but I'm okay with that. When I first started dating my wife, I remember this story. I was painting in my studio, which was like sort of attached by another room to the kitchen, and my girlfriend at the time was making food, blah, 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 and I was painting, and I was having these deep thoughts, and this is so stupid, but it's fun to talk about. I remember going into my girlfriend at the time, and I was like, I just realized something. As a man, I've always thought it was kind of like silly or nonsensical how often my friends that are girls, would just talk for no reason. It wasn't going anywhere. They would just like for the guy, it's a typical, and all you hear is like, it's not going anywhere. It's not around its central topic. They're not trying to talk about it. It was just like, just talk. And it never made sense to me until this exact moment. And this exact moment was, I realized that women do that to figure things out just as much as express. And here I was, a man standing behind an easel, painting a picture for no apparent reason other than to do the exact same thing. Why am I doing this? There's no purpose. I'm just painting a picture, I'm having a conversation. I'm expressing, but I'm also figuring things out. I'm like, oh my God, this is why women, as a stereotype, do that. For the same reason that men and women paint, or men sit around fish, which I don't do and I've never understood, and now I do. But it's so funny, isn't it? It's weird how we, in our roles that we're in, think that the other, whatever that other is for you, whether it's based around like gender or a job or whatever it might be, the other is so strange or doesn't make any sense to you, when in reality, you're probably doing the exact same thing manifested in a different way. you were talking about, meditating or how did I say that so weird? Meditating. Who says it like that? About about meditating.
You put the emphasis on the wrong syllable.
Yes. There you go. It's so funny because I too meditate as much as possible, but since having kids, it's virtually impossible. But I'll do it. I'll drop my daughter at piano class, and then I'll sit in the car for 10 minutes and meditate, or as I'm painting, I'll meditate, or when I'm walking. And I feel like for people that are very, very busy or don't get meditating, I think that it's just becoming aware of everything at once, like becoming aware of your body, your thoughts, just kind of letting things happen. It's the analogy they teach you in meditation, like your thoughts are like clouds floating by and you're just being a witness to them. You're just watching them. And I think the more you can become aware of all of those different clouds in your life, the more sort of connected you are, the less disconnected. The more you're aware, hey, is my posture good? The more you're aware, am I saying the right things? Am I saying the wrong things? And being okay with it, because it's just like a cloud. It's going to go by. You'll be like, oh, interesting. Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, I do know. And I mean, you're describing creativity as a tool for problem solving. Yes. Earlier when you're talking about the women who we talk in circles and we're did you know in Spanish that's
Is it?
We're talking about Spanish. Yeah.
Do you speak Spanish?
I once was sí, el próximo tiempo podemos hablar y charlar en español, okay? Next time we'll speak Spanish. My friends, because my name's Meredith Hackwith, right?
Okay.
And I'm blonde with light skin and blue eyes. And when I told this one girl I was talking with, there was a group of ladies, and they go, okay, we got to confess, you're a little funny. And I said, how am I funny? Okay, well, you see, you look the way you do. And I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely a white girl. And they were like, yes, that. And your name is Meredith Hackwith. And I was like, well, what's funny about that? Well, in Spanish, we imitate English as because we don't have that sound. And you are like the stereotype of like a white lady, and your name is Meredith Hackwith. So it's funny. And she goes, so I call you Mari. So that's how I got my Spanish nickname of Mari, because they're like, you're. But anyway, rabbit trail complete.
Love it. It's great.
Yes. So next time we'll speak in Spanish maybe. But anyway, back to creativity as a tool for problem solving. It's interesting because like what you're describing to me is the usefulness of creativity and the usefulness of pleasurable activities, because they lead to practical things. Yeah. And so it's just that getting over that little hump of justification for the thing. And for people like you're talking about your kids, there's different seasons to your life. And for someone like you, additionally, who makes a living doing super cool creative stuff, but you also have a jillion like passion projects. Yeah. And how do you communicate with your family about, oh, this is daddy's having fun today. You can interrupt and I can help, or I can hang out. I can put this down compared to the moments where you're like, daddy needs to finish this because there's a deadline and someone's giving me money for this.
Are you familiar with that whole pick 3 topic? I think Randy Zuckerberg came up with it. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure it was her. But it was something that I found really interesting. And the concept is basically there's only so many things you can focus on or prioritize in life. You could pick 3. And she gave an example, work, sleep, family, let's say. So I use that sort of as a mind model of how I approach my day and how I approach life. So for me, it's, family and sleep / health, and I would say, business or art. I kind of put that in one thing. And so I think it's important with creativity, especially and this sort of goes back to some stuff you talked about before with having discipline and whatnot. I think it's important to put fenced-in yards around the things in your life that are important. And then once you're within that fenced-in yard, you should be able to have freedom to be creative, to have fun, to let go. So maybe the Meredith side of you that's very structured and needs that says, okay, this weekend, block this fenced-in yard. You can go crazy with seashells and make a wreath. That's okay. You're allowed to do that. And you gave yourself permission, aka an area boundary. Within this 2 days, you're going to make this awesome wreath seashell thing. And so for me, I try to do the same thing. I say, okay, I have a block of an hour in the morning where I work out, and then I have a block of time that I'm going to do such and such, and a block of time that I do such and such. And my painting as well has a block of time, a fenced-in yard, like my studio that I'm in now. And so if I'm working on a project, whether it's for fun or whether it's for work or whatever, or maybe a combination of the two, I say to myself, okay, for the next hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, I tell my wife, my kids are usually at school when I do this, so it usually doesn't interfere with them. But I'll tell my wife, I'll put my computer on Do Not Disturb. I'm like, I'm going into the zone, and I'm getting lost, and I'm going to be guilt-free, and I'm going to do my thing. And when I feel like time is up, boop, next, go on to the next task. And so for me, I sort of compartmentalize everything in that regard. And so I feel like it's important it's like that Jocko Willink quote, discipline equals freedom. It's very, very true. You have to be disciplined in order to have freedom, both in a very literal sense as far as a country or government goes, but also as far as your life goes. If you're structured and you have discipline to work out, you can have the freedom to feel healthy and feel mobile and feel strong. If you have the discipline to create blocks of time for your creativity, you also will have the time within that to just be nuts, be a kid, have fun, enjoy yourself. And so I think a lot of people don't do that, and it doesn't have to be super complicated, but that's sort of how I approach it. Does that answer the question that you threw at me?
Yeah, I like it. No, it totally does. It's, I mean, the underlying spirit of that is intentionality, because you're like, okay, my kids are at school, and obviously everyone's situation is different, but you communicate with Chelsea that, okay, I'm in the zone, like you have a word for it. I really like that. And I was just imagining that for parents that maybe have to be in the zone in front of their kids, that's actually probably a good thing, because then you've got a generation that doesn't not know how to make friends, that doesn't, like, 'cause spending time with friends is also presumably pleasurable, that values exploring creativity, that it values exploring passion projects. And yeah, I like how you like tailored that for yourself. I feel like the formula, which is not the right word, but the formula for time management for the things that you love is a non-formula. It's about looking inside yourself, assessing what you do and don't like, and then using intention and creativity to create a fence, like you said, that you can wiggle around in.
So don't get me wrong, it's not always as intuitive and easy as that. I also I use Trello for my to-do notes and everything, and I have everything so incredibly structured in every category of my life. Like, I'm so incredibly anal and structured. Every goal, everything I like to do, everything I have to do, every business I'm involved with, everything has like a hierarchy of tasks and goals and intentions and either a written or non-written mission statement or purpose of some sort. And then I try to approach each day with, okay, what are the things and the top priorities that I have that will be the most useful. So I don't make that only stuff that's productive, in air quotes. It could be stuff like yesterday we went apple picking with the kids. That was part of my thing. But I also, to touch upon creativity specifically, like when I'm playing, I'll play guitar when my wife is cooking dinner, or if I'm, cooking, she'll do something else. And I try to do that in front of my kids, or my brother was over the other day, we were jamming on our guitar. I try to make it fun for the kids. I want them to see that being creative is not a waste of time. It can be enjoyable and fun. And I'll set up easels and have my kids, they'll invite some neighbors over, and we'll have like a little like paint session with all the kids in the neighborhood. So I try to do things to instill the values that I think are important. Going back to Spanish, I make breakfast for the kids in the morning, and when I'm doing it, I'll try to do as much of it as I can in Spanish. I'll talk to them in Spanish. I'll teach them what the things mean. If we go places, they get super annoyed because I'll ask them a question in Spanish, and I just things like that. I try to incorporate all of my interests, but also all the things that I think are useful life skills, and make it all fun, and also think about present and future and past in a way that they can understand and are useful.
Yeah. I mean, that's like true integration, right? I was
think so.
interviewing this his name's Shane Reynolds. He has been on he was a TV host slash is a TV host, but he was on Travel Channel. That was kind of what he was known for a show called Shane Untamed. And that's him and his wife they have this incredible life where they travel and they video and photograph, and it's just amazing. And when we were talking, he said, when you really have this, he said this without saying it, basically, this appetite for life that you and I have, that you have to be willing at some point to blur the lines of the boxes and integrate the things that you want to do in the daily. And I kind of wonder, and I kind of suspect actually, that the problem, the barrier, the obstacles that a lot of people face when they're trying to make time for the things that they love is they're trying to insert more boxes, and the grid is already locked in. And it's if I think they took an approach like you do, like you want to learn Spanish. Like, for example, my GPS is in Spanish.
Awesome. I love that.
I struggle with numbers. And so hearing them and going, okay, that was 600 meters. That's the other thing. Like, I wanted to learn how the rest of the world measures stuff.
Sure.
And so it does meters and kilometers. And I used to do my grocery list in Spanish. Like, I would write it in Spanish. Now I order groceries. So I don't do that. But it was just that integration piece of it that has helped me. And I just don't think I ever realized that until you said it just now, that may also help other people to just have a richer currency of life by not trying to add a box to the grid, but just making the grid more colorful.
I think I think what people do wrong, they definitely try to add more boxes to the grid, but I think that what I do, and I think you probably do as well, you make certain portions of your life non-negotiable. So I feel like if you make your health, your sleep, your fitness, your family, your work, or whatever it is for you and for everyone else listening, if you make certain things non-negotiable, then if there's not room for other stuff, then fuck it, who cares, So it's like, for me speaking, it's like I have to work out almost every day. I have to eat healthy, extremely healthy, to the point where most people would be like, why are you eating like that? I have, there's certain things that I do. There's certain ways that I think. Even with your thinking, you have to think certain ways. That doesn't mean you can't wander, but if you let yourself get too stuck in depressed thinking or anxious thinking, I feel like that philosophy sort of goes with that as well. You have to have non-negotiable ways that you act and behave and how you approach life. And that generally will fill up your life with stuff that matters to you. And stuff like nonsense TV shows or excessive scrolling on social media, that just doesn't fit because I'm too busy doing things that do matter to me. And I think that people don't put enough intention behind that. Like, they might think that such and such matters to me and it'll matter to me someday when I do it. No. You got it all backward. If traveling or seeing the world matters to you, you don't think about it like then. Do it now. Or if, playing or being musical matters to me, or being fluent in Spanish matters to me. And someday when I retire, I'm going to like, no, you got it all backwards. And I think that people do not prioritize or intentionalize their life enough.
Yeah. I want to springboard onto a word that you said, which is the prioritize, because another hiccup I think a lot of people run into, and certainly one that I've experienced as a person that just has diarrhea of ideas. Like, I just feel like, that's graphic, but that's how it feels. I have
pap smears, diarrhea, all kinds of stuff going on in this podcast. Ladies and gentlemen,
to the show. It's not safe for work, but it's not boring, everyone. Yeah. So I just feel like someone needs to hire me to just come and give ideas. Like, I really would love to break into that, whatever business world that is, because I just have endless ideas that I have no time to execute. I am working on my workflow to improve it so that the things that are creative expressions in progress can continue to be in progress, right? Be in motion, like the podcast, right?
Sure.
So I'm trying to dial in that workflow in order to make space. But however, the question that I would ask you I'd love to hear your thoughts on is prioritizing these passion projects, right? I have a surf documentary that I started on in 2020. It's very cool. It's first generation surfers in Pensacola. Is it done? No. No, it sure isn't. You are writing a book or have written a book. That's something. So, and then you're the guitar and the Spanish and the weightlifting and the nature and the children and the skateboarding and the surfing. Am I missing anything? Like you got a lot of stuff.
Rock climbing, jujitsu, lots of other stuff.
Yeah, you got lots of stuff. So how do you, in your world, how do you prioritize which project you're going to move forward?
So I'll give you a practical thing that I do first. There's an app that I heard on another podcast like a year ago, and it's been very helpful. It's called Brain Toss, I believe it is. And so I have, like everyone, we have things pouring in our head all day long, and this thing is great because if I have an idea like I do, I'll just throw it into this app, and it just hits send, write it down, and hit send, and it goes to either my inbox or my Trello or my Evernote, whichever I choose to send it to. And so I have in my Trello. Are you familiar with Trello? It's a pretty cool tool.
Yes.
It's cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty cool. So I have one of the columns is set to be called capture, which I think I probably borrowed from Stephen Covey or one of the many billions of books I read on the topic. But I have a capture section where just everything just pours into, right? And on a quasi-regular basis, I'll go through there and see which of it is nonsense, which of it fits in somewhere. Like I might have an idea for, I should do this on my website. I should learn this song on guitar, and I should do this with the kids, and blah, 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 all these different things. I should do this new business or whatever. And I'll throw it in there, and then I'll categorize it in all these different, like I said, different columns or different categories. And one might fit into the business section, one's personal, whatever. It might get niched down even further. And then I'll go through there and look through them all and be like, okay, which of these is the biggest priority at the moment? Which of these things is something that I really want to work on? Which of these things only takes 10 minutes to nudge forward? And I try is the emphasis here because I'm not perfect. Each day, okay, what are the 1, 2, 3 things that I can do that will either feel the best or push me in a direction that I need to go in, or will it be just enjoyable? And it's constantly shifting. Like you mentioned the book. I started a book many years ago, and I pretty much finished it. And to make a long story short, I spent a lot of years working on it, and I finished it. And afterwards, I read it. I'm like, I don't know. I feel like it just needs something. So I just pushed it off for the past couple of years because I feel like by not thinking about it, it's become more clear in my head. Like I've been working on it in my head. Now I'm more clear on what I was trying to do with it. And so whenever the time comes that I have time to work on it, I think I'll be more focused on it. Or if I'm working on a painting that I haven't touched in months, in my head, I sort of still working on things. Like we're always marinating things in our head. And we can choose to marinate on the latest topics in the news in the back of our head, or we can choose to think about, XYZ projects or ideas or thoughts. And it's up to us how we spend that currency again of our life. Do we spend all this extra time, whether it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 2 minutes, thinking about something that's going to help us? Or do you spend your time worrying about things that you have zero control over? So for me, I feel like I take my scheduling and my prioritization and maybe like blocks of one day, then a week, and then maybe a few months, like whatever that comes out to. And so I try to just prioritize and schedule things that are in those zones. Like, what can I do today? What am I going to try to achieve by next week? And then in a few months from now, where do I want to be? I don't know. It's not perfect. That's just what I do. I always feel like a loser because I can't achieve all the stuff I want to do. I feel like, I wish I only had one hobby. I am jealous of people that only like to do one thing. That seems really boring for me. I'd rather be mediocre at lots and lots of things. But that kind of hurts when it comes down to brand, as you know, marketing and business and all these other categories. If you just drill in on one thing, you're going to really do great. But for me, for better or worse, I like to do a lot of things, and that's just who I am. So,
well, that just perfectly illustrates the two sides, right?
Mm-hmm.
The duality of our inner world that values a metric, and the part of our inner world that says, "Fuck the metric.
Yeah.
This is fun." And it goes back and forth. I feel that very deeply. Like two places that I feel that is I love disc golf and I love archery. And
I love that too.
Those are, yeah. And, it's hot here in the Florida Panhandle. So this is like archery season, disc golf season. And every time I do those things, the people that I'm with are like, oh God, Meredith, you could be so good. You could be like in a club or something. You should totally like dial this in. I'm like, yeah, I should dial it in. And then there's that
Do you like
metric
picture yourself
side.
as like one of those girls that like stands on her hands and arches her back and uses her feet to pull the bow? And have you seen that? Those chicks that do that?
Yes, there's that one British woman that does it on
Might have seen her.
Instagram, and there's fire involved and sparkly leotards. And I'm like, yeah, I have a sparkly leotard and some fire. Sure. That sounds cool. Mostly I get excited about hitting the target. Actually, more than a sparkly leotard, I think about who I imagine my ancestors were, and I feel like I can feel them when I'm there. So I think they were like Viking water people, like, like on the ships, and they had and the women were the warriors. And that's I would rather braid my hair and dress like Lagatha from that show on Netflix than have a sparkly leotard. But yeah, so there's that part of me, the metric side that kicks in, that goes, I want to be great at this. And then I feel bad that I don't pursue it to that level, just like you were saying.
Yeah.
So it's like the back and forth, but there's seasonality in it. And it's just hard for us to, as humans, I think modern humans, to accept that we are a part of seasons. We expect of ourselves absolute consistency, absolute 110%. It's that industrial revolution leftover residue on our primitive brains that goes, no, you must be operating at full throttle all the time. And yet we don't expect that out of nature. Like, sometimes chickens don't lay eggs. The leaves, they fall off of the trees. The weather isn't always perfect, like, 75 and sunny. And yet we don't get mad at those things, those parts of nature that change their level of productivity, because we're like, yes, it is a natural thing for chickens to not lay eggs 24/7.
Yeah.
And yet of ourselves, we expect us to not just be laying eggs, but to be laying the golden eggs every day, all the time.
What just came to mind is I think a lot of it comes down to ego, because I think a lot of us, we get stuck on certain things, and the idea of changing how you see yourself and how your friends see yourself is a painful thing. Like if you go from drinking a lot to not drinking, your friend groups change, your identity as a person changes. If you were always known as Meredith, the Viking archer girl, and you were in these world competitions, and all of a sudden you're like, now I'm going to crochet or whatever. I'm going to make a YouTube channel on crocheting or whatever. Like whenever we switch identities, we're like, oh man, it's a painful type situation. And I think it's okay to spend periods of your life where all you want to do is one thing and you're obsessive about it, and then switch gears. And you could always look back and say, oh, I could have been this world-class Viking archer chick. But it's like, it's okay to like just kind of move around and taste things. It's like Gary Vee talks about, like tasting things, which is like kind of a nice way to think about it, like a little like a buffet of life. And I think that's cool. Like I think about my own life. There was periods of my time where I was better than an average skateboarder. Now I'm not. There was periods of my life where I was slightly better than an average surfer. Now I'm definitely not. There was periods of my life where I was like above average, or a little bit above average on a lot of different things, that some of those things I let go of just to pick up new things. And that's okay. It's okay to try things out, because how else are you going to know what you like or what you're good at? But it's also important to make time for those things. It's people that work too much, and we definitely, I'm sure, fall into that category of obsessive work and productivity, like that. But once you make a seashell wreath, or you watch sunrise, or you go on a trip, we all know that feeling of like, oh my God, I forgot what it feels like to feel good. Oh my God, I forgot how like, whoa, I forgot. We forget. And that's the reason that you should stick to or pursue creativity. It's not so you can, why should I do this? I'm not going to be good at it. It's so you can have that feeling, and that feeling reverberates out in all parts of your life, because you're a better person after you do those things. Even if you play guitar and you suck, the rest of the day you're going to be like, yeah, I play guitar. And it makes you an interesting person to other people when you're good at something, or when you're passionate about something also, or when you're obsessive about something. It's interesting. I find myself listening to podcasts on topics that I have no real interest in, but I love hearing the passion from the person. And I think people like that. And so in a social setting, if you're, let's say you're single and you're dating, you're going to be a lot more appealing to people if you have true interests. And guess what? You're actually more interesting to yourself. And that's really what matters. And I think people don't do that. They're like, why should I draw? Why should I paint? Why should I write? Why should I do whatever? Fill in the blank. That's why, because you want to be more interesting to yourself. You want to enjoy life. You want to let those lessons, those feelings go throughout the rest of your life and not just save it for when you're retired. You'll learn to make a sweater or whatever. It's important to do those things now, I think.
Wow. I never connected it with ego and your identity. And that is something I'm going to have to meditate on. That is really good. I'm really glad that you shared that. And this has been such a great conversation. I thank you so much, especially knowing how picky you are with the way that you spend your time. That deepens my gratitude for you to be willing to come on the show again. And I hope that this conversation encourages people, because, I mean, think of all the artists out there that aren't arting, the people out there who aren't playing music, or, whatever their creative outlet would be, or whatever their pleasurable outlet. Maybe they don't consider themselves creative, and that creates a block. I mean, that creative word doesn't have to be used. You and I both know creativity flows in everything possible in the world. But for some people, they really have this block mentally that they are not creative. So if that's if you're listening to this and that is a mental block for you, then just substitute the word pleasurable. Like, what is pleasurable, and how can you raise your frequency by being in that more often, and then appreciate the utility that comes after that, which includes, reworking identity, apparently. So I love that. Thank you, Jay.
Yeah, I'll leave with this note, but I feel like people look at creativity in strange ways. We put it under the umbrella of creativity. And take the visual arts, for instance. You could be an artist that documents exactly what you see, or you could take a photograph, like we see on every social media. Someone takes a photograph, and they use colored pencils, they make it look exactly like the photograph. And that's certainly that's certainly a craft. It's absolutely a skill. Is it being creative? Is it making something out of nothing? I don't know. I think it could be debated. And I think the same goes with, like I said, I'm trying my best to be a better guitarist, but I haven't been very creative with it. I've been trying to learn guitar theory. I've been trying to learn music theory and learn chords and learn all these different things and practical type situations. And I've been trying to master songs that someone else wrote. And maybe I can get to the point where I can read music and play it, and that's absolutely a major skill, and that's absolutely a great hobby. Is it being creative? I don't know. I don't think so. I think that being creative, involves a lot of making something out of nothing and taking chances, and I try to do that with my art as much as possible, and I think that's very, very not only possible, but important to do in all the different things that we do. It's great to take a step-by-step approach to learn a skill like Spanish, for instance. It's great to learn, all the different forms of verbs and all the different subjunctives and all the different things. But are you being creative with the language? No, I don't think so. I think it's once you're speaking the language, maybe you write a poem in Spanish, or maybe you write a song in Spanish, or maybe you formulate paragraphs pour out of your mouth that were never said before. That's being creative. So I think the idea of being creative is not good enough advice. I think take chances, fuck around a little bit with your thing, be willing to make mistakes. Don't just follow the step-by-step approach of like, here is how you do this. Let me follow step 1, 2, 3, or let me copy this photo exactly as it is, or let me, whatever it might be. I think it's important to take chances, because that's where the magic is. I don't know if there's a lot of magic in the process of self-expression unless you're doing something that wasn't there before you started it. If you're not conjuring out of magical thin air, then you're missing a big part of it, I think.
That's true. Yeah, I would agree with you for sure, because drawing to use your example of copying a picture and drawing, it's cathartic and it's pleasurable. And maybe it's like a stepping stone to something that is more like liberated, like there's like the empty space, like the colored pencil on the paper is like, ooh, it's like when you're writing your book, the blinking cursor on the empty Word doc. It's like, ooh, that's a lot of freedom. And so there's definitely stepping stones to that. But people are missing out if they don't branch into that. I would agree with that. Thank you again, man. This has been great. Do you want to shout out what you got going on? I think you should shout out. I'm going to tell you what you should shout out, Jay.
Yes, please tell me. Put it in the chat and I'll read it.
There you go. Thank you, everyone. I so appreciate you being here. I think people can probably hear this. This is why I'm gonna, give you a low pitch to shout this out. They can hear the coaching part of you, the part of your offerings that includes creative coaching. I feel like that came out a little bit today. So you can shout out whatever you want, but I think you should probably, touch on that because I think people could hear it today.
I'm not really good at shouting out myself per se. I'm an artist. I'm a dad. I try to be a good person. If you're interested in following me, I'm a social media whore. You could just look up Jay Alders on you pick the platform, I'm probably there. I have prints and original art on my website. I make a living from art. So if you like what you see, please, be supportive to me or any artist or musician that you come across. We all could use it. And like Meredith alluded to, I offer creative coaching, which is something that I thoroughly enjoy. I take it from a more spiritual, intuitive approach as opposed to like a step 1, 2, 3 thing. And that's not something that I do a huge amount of because I'm very selective with who I work with. But, I also have a podcast as well. I think it's important just to pursue your interests. And I think that the visual arts is something that people should value just as much as putting on a background song while you're cooking dinner. I think it's important to have art in your house because intuitively you're going to see the art and it's going to teach you about how the process of that artist sees the world. And I think the more that we can connect to other creatives, the more we can learn from each other. I'll leave you with that.
Beautifully said. Thank you again.
Yeah, thanks, Meredith. Always love talking to you.